Anwar Ibrahim, a name heavily embroiled and embedded in Malaysian politics. At 71, the reformist official has spent the past 3 decades weaving in and out of the country's tumultuous state of affairs.
There was clearly conspiracy to annihilate me politically.
Once a deputy to Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, Anwar has been jailed twice, royally pardoned, and now has made a political comeback in an unlikely partnership.
My suffering and the pain is minimal compared to the suffering of the nation.
Anwar's return to politics has been far from easy. Since 2015, the Malaysian government has been facing off with one of the biggest corruption scandals in the world.
One MDB accused in Malaysia of corruption and fraud.
Following Mahathir's re-election in May of last year, in itself a political earthquake, Anwar is now Prime Minister designate and is on track to become Prime Minister by 2020.
Right now, yes, the arrangement is that I become Prime Minister. But you are right. Ultimately, it's the people that decide.
We discuss politics, corruption, the future of his country. Now, on Talk Asia. Let's start with the change that took place in this country with the last election. The overthrow of a government whose party had been in power for more than 6 decades. And the Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, takes over. How surprised were you that the result went as it did?
Well, I wasn't surprised because I'm more optimistic. Because during the elections, I was in prison. I have to be optimistic.
In comes the new government. Dr. Mahathir is Prime Minister at the sprightly age of 93, and you're still in prison. But he can only govern with you and your party, correct?
Well, it's true.
Anwar's relationship with the current Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, is complicated at best. Anwar spent more than a decade rising up the political ranks during Mahathir's first tenure as Prime Minister. A crucial turning point followed the 1997 financial crisis, with both politicians openly questioning the suitability of the other. In 1998, Anwar has been arrested on charges of corruption and sodomy. He pleads not guilty and says the charges are politically motivated.
It shouldn't be a charge in the first place.
He is released in 2004, but that freedom is short-lived. Anwar is imprisoned for sodomy once again in 2015, this time with the controversial former Prime Minister Najib Razak directing the way things go. Anwar has maintained his innocence. With Malaysian politics rife with concerns of corruption, it is a surprise visit from Mahathir that brings things full circle.
To pardon Datuk Sri Anwar immediately.
Anwar is royally pardoned of all charges, and Mahathir has reclaimed power for the time being. Do you still claim and believe that your convictions and imprisonment was wrong and politically motivated?
Yes, no doubt about that. The general view is that there was clearly a conspiracy to annihilate me politically. I was in solitary confinement in virtually a lockup, and no access to phone, newspapers, television. But I had access to books. It's tough because the impression by many other cliques in the region, where they say, well, you know, this is special treatment, that's what they want to portray. They treated me like a hardcore criminal.
How on earth can you do a deal with somebody who put you in prison and not only prosecuted you or led to the prosecution of you, but fabricated the evidence, corrupted the judiciary, and locked you up?
I suffered. It was a painful decision, but my suffering and the pain is minimal compared to the suffering of the nation. Now, given a choice, I choose the country. My point is, the system has been compromised and degenerated into essentially an authoritarian system where the judiciary lost its independence and all institutions of governance have been compromised. That's a fact.
Corrupted.
Corrupted.
You know viewers are fascinated by this tale. That you are now back in coalition with the man who locked you up. How on earth do you sit opposite him in a room over a cup of tea and not want to bear resentment?
Why can't we also look at the positive side? But more important is not the past, is how then we program, work together to chart a new future for the country. Both of us were perplexed. We said that the system's so rotten, we had to save it. And that actually triggered.
Who contacted who first?
He did. He came to see me. I was surprised. I wasn't too enthusiastic, to be frank, but I was polite.
The man who locked you up came to see you and you were surprised? I mean, gobsmacked and nearly fallen on the floor would be more my way.
No, but months preceded that, he was already critical of the government.
Yeah.
He made clear that, look, if we want to save, then Mahathir and Anwar has to work together.
Does he have to say, I'm sorry for what I did before?
As long as he say, look, we have to change. We cannot be stuck to the old, obsolete, corrupt ways of the past. To me, isn't that positive? It's enough for him to say, look, we are grateful, we are thankful to Anwar and the family for having suffered for the last 20 years. To me, personally, it's a great remark by him that is so satisfying. But to the country, here comes a man who talks, look, if you want to save this country, get rid of corruption, get better governance, and reform the entire institutions of governance. What else can you expect from a 93-year-old man? I would say my admiration increases, enhances, because of this sort of a commitment in Parliament.
What was happening was the money literally just being handed out.
They bought whatever you can imagine, Monet's paintings, huge apartments in New York, planes and ship yachts and whatever they can find, and diamonds and everything. And all this is recorded. You cannot imagine. That is why I think people make reference to this as one of the greatest scandals involving a government. What does it show? The entire system has failed. The elites were compromised. The professors, the scholars, the academicians, and the corporate leaders were all either complicit or muted. And that's why we are landed in this fiasco now.
So this is where we now move forward. You're now in government, or you're part of, so you've got access to papers and documents that you wouldn't have had in the opposition. And do you discover how deep the rot is?
It's appalling. It's worse than what we anticipated. We thought that there's something that we can handle as a nation. Now we realize that it has to be an international effort.
So Goldman Sachs, to be clear, you say they're complicit. Are they complicit by overt act, or by simply turning away and looking in the opposite direction and ignoring the obvious?
I think it's both, because the commission is almost 600 million. It's huge by any standards, and it is not possible for the entire institution of Goldman Sachs not to know. Now, secondly, the deal was certainly dubious, and just to protect that, any other due diligence would prove otherwise. They're smart enough, they had enormous experience in dealing with these things, they knew. And I think we as a government need to be very tough in our negotiations, either to go through the legal process or in our negotiations for a settlement. What we need is to get back our money so that we can serve the people in the right manner.
Well, I suppose, I'm guessing you're going to get your money back in some shape or form, because this is a scandal of a giant proportions. But if you don't...
No, it's not just 600. They have to pay for the compensation, the losses, the image of the country, the loss of years.
Well, so how much are you looking for? 1 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion?
It should at least be double of that, certainly.
Really?
Yes, double of what we lost.
Oh, so you're talking about over 1 billion?
Yes.
And if they don't pay, what will you do?
Go to the courts in every country possible where they were involved. Here in Malaysia, in the United States.
So you're determined to make as much trouble for them as you can?
No, we want enough resources back to serve our people. I don't believe that the country must suffer or the people must suffer just because of the greed of some of these corporate leaders.
If that's true, maybe it is the banking license has to be taken away to prove the point that this won't continue.
Well, that's for the authorities in the United States to decide. Well, our interest is purely to prove our case, to show malfeasance, and to get back our funds.
You've painted an extremely grim picture of the situation, correct?
Yes.
Why would anybody invest in this country? Why would anybody willingly put $1 or a ringgit into this country until it's cleaned up?
It is the process of cleaning up better than most countries that you have seen. We are committed to good governance, transparency, ease of doing business. And this we are committed because people have suffered enough, and we therefore have this commitment to do.
It's one thing to change the law, but the same people are still running things.
Well, not all. I mean,
you know what I'm saying.
We have to gradually change, yes. But people do have that sort of empathy. I mean, some people just went along with the corrupt system. Some were deeply involved. So we have to differentiate the different categories. So allow those who are willing to repent and move, because we can't then be charging 100,000 people. You see, we must have that compassion again to allow people to undertake this new commitment. I think this is essential because the country, the transition has to be peaceful.
You seem to want to convince me that you're cleaning up, but I'm not sure I see the full evidence of it.
I think the key people who were responsible must be held accountable. But the operators at different level must be given that space to then adopt the changes and understand. Probably some form of I'm not saying training, sound like North Korea, but exposure to them, right. To appreciate that people have suffered, the country has gone through this turmoil, and you must either accept this new regime of transparency and good governance, or you get out.
Do you see an irony of the Prime Minister talking about transparency and good governance when he was the least exponent of transparency and good governance when he was in power last? It's as if the scales have fallen from his eyes and he sees the truth.
But this is his, I think to his credit, to Mahathir's credit. He comes here, he was there in Parliament and came out with this agenda. Look, we will have to undertake major reforms in this country, starting with the judiciary, the civil service, etc., etc. And I was there. I said, look, instead of being cynical, I said, look, this is a great achievement of Malaysians. You can have this man with enormous experience and 22 years as Prime Minister, and now came back at the age of 93 and saying that, let us all work together and undertake this reform.
After what's been a pivotal year in Malaysian politics, Anwar Ibrahim has high hopes for the future of Malaysia.
In a matter of 1 or 2 years, I think you can see a remarkable change in this country.
But the fate of the nation depends heavily on his unpredictable relationship with his former foe, the current Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad. The two form a political odd couple, forced to put decades of enmity and differences aside.
I accept the verdict of the people
in an effort to defeat a common political enemy.
Well, both of us realize that if you quarrel with each other, the winner will be Najib. The removal of Najib is far more important than our personal grudges against each other.
With Najib Razak ousted from power in 2018, an agreement between these politicians exists, promising a transfer of power from 93-year-old Mahathir to Anwar in the next 2 years. Is it your understanding, and let's be absolutely clear, that in 2 years, give or take, Dr. Mahathir will stand down and you will become Prime Minister?
Yes, that's the arrangement.
Well, hasn't the Prime Minister shifted his language a little bit?
Would you remain in office for longer than 2 years if necessary?
Well, I hope not too long, because I'm 93. How long can I last? Maybe 2 years. But if I'm well and people want me to serve, I will serve.
So you'll stay on longer if necessary?
If necessary, if people want me to.
Now talks about what the people want and when the time is right, and all these other phrases that could suggest he might extend his period. You're laughing.
Because people kept hounding him on the same question every other day at every single media conference. I don't think it is fair to him, because even when I was around, people asked, are you sure? Are you committed to do that? Naturally, then he would come and adjust some of his statements, but I don't think it is quite fair, because he has said numerous times that he will not renege on the agreement, and I'm quite happy with that.
Which brings us to a really tricky area to talk about. Why do you trust a man who put you in prison twice?
Well, in politics, in governance, in life, we would realize there's certain overriding interests, and that compassion and forgiveness is essential. You have to move on. You cannot be tied to the past. We entered into the arrangement, at least both of us believe that this country must be saved. That was the agenda.
So, sir, to be clear, is it still your intention to become Prime Minister? And if somebody better came along, or do you fear you'll be knifed once again?
Well, there's no Brutus in this episode. Right now, yes, the arrangement is that I become Prime Minister. But you are right. Ultimately, it's the people that decide. If I'm a committed Democrat, I have to honor that arrangement.
But the next election is how many years away?
4.
So you should, according to your agreement, you should take part in the middle of this parliamentary term, giving you 2 years to embed yourself to be the next for the next election.
Yes, that's the arrangement now.
Will it happen?
I have no reason to doubt that this will not happen. People are a bit cynical at times because they say, look, you are bitter foes. Can you trust? But I have no reason to doubt the sincerity of Mahathir in honoring the arrangement.
What is Malaysia's place now in Southeast Asia? I see the ASEAN meetings were taking place. By your own admission and discussion today, that corruption has been deep in this country and needs rooting out. People looking at Malaysia might be tempted to say this is a troubled country, it's best to stay away from investing here just yet.
No, to the contrary. People are quite enthusiastic. They say, look, at least we find a country that talks about ease of doing business, more transparent and clear economic policies, admitting that yes, there were endemic corruption of the past. And instead of dealing with countries that are still in a state of denial. And I have met in a number of countries, Hong Kong, Singapore and China, that people are actually looking at Malaysia and hoping that we will re-emerge as one of the greatest success stories in ASEAN.
How far do you think that has to go? How far is that process underway?
It has begun. In a matter of 1 or 2 years, I think you can see a remarkable change in this country in terms of foreign direct investments too, and tourism.
If you don't want to be an Asian tiger again, what would you like to be?
No, economically, it remains the fundamental issue to my mind. It has to be vibrant, because only through that you can then distribute wealth and ensure that problems of endemic corruption and inequality be handled. For a multiracial, multireligious country, this is essential, that we deal with these problems first by propelling the economy, then ensuring that there is effective affirmative action based on need, changing from the old paradigm based on race.
That's fascinating. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.